Now we have the sound going. All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's pre-lock show where we'll go game by game, show you what I'm doing in the DS, and also just answer some of your questions, talk through your concerns on this slate. We have a nice 7-game slate. A little bit of injury news that we're waiting on, but not as much as we usually have on the slate. Fingers crossed I didn't jinx us there. But let's jump right into it. Well, the weekend was good. We had quite a few takedowns. I know my guy Diego had a takedown. That was freaking awesome to see. And I saw a lot of people crushing every sport: NBA, MMA, MLB. NASCAR was good yesterday too. So if you're not a DFS Army member, click the link in the description. Use promo code BOB and join the party. But let's keep the good vibes going. Starting off with this Utah against the Hornets game. So this is an interesting one because it's the 4th highest total on the slate, pretty middle of the pack. But these are two just really bad defensive teams. Teams that we typically like to target when it comes to DFS, and they're facing each other. Of course, for Utah, they've given up. They have Kessler, Sexton, Cody Williams out. Quite a few of the other guys on this team have been out all season. And so because of that, there's some guys that are starting to pop up a bit for us. Kyle Filipowski, he's the obvious play. At 6,500, you can't trust these Jazz guys. They've been volatile all year. But in a soft matchup, I'm willing to kind of take a stand and make sure these guys show up in my lines. Great matchup. I like playing bigs against the Hornets. We've been doing that forever. So 23% men on Filipowski for me. He wasn't showing up by himself. Collier, I mean, I don't trust the guy, but I'll put a 20% min on him. Again, soft matchup. Keontae George's ownership is creeping up, so I'll put a 16% min on him. And then Bryce Sensabaugh, 14% min on him. So Bryce, he's 3,900. He doesn't do a lot while he's out there, but there's quite a few value options on this slate. And per usual for this time of year, I just like to mix these guys in. So that's why I'm forcing exposure there. And then Oscar, 4K big, should see plenty of minutes tonight. There's a lot of really solid center plays on the slate. I had a like on him, and he was showing up as a core play. I like him tonight. He's just not my favorite center play on the slate. Being around 36% is ideal, but I will put a 40% min on him just so I don't have to think about him anymore on this slate. So yeah, I'm forcing exposure to a lot of the Jazz tonight. What's up, Darius? Agreed. Let's get some money. Kid Catastrophe. What's up, man? Good to see you. Rodney, Cedric. Good to see everybody in here. R. Fletch said, what time does the show start? Looking to lock in some winning picks. I hope my bankroll is getting... Oh, I hope to have some winning picks. Your bankroll is getting low. Let's get right, man. Let's get right. All right. So these are some guys I like for the Jazz. Moving forward, we have the Hornet side of things. Same thing from the Jazz perspective, but the nice thing here is that they also have a super soft matchup. The ownership's not too crazy here either, which I like. Nick Smith, let me sort this by salary. That's crazy. I don't know how I had that sorted. But KJ Simpson is someone who will show up in your lines by himself. He's showing up in about 52% of my lines right now. I'll probably end up a little bit closer to 60 by the time we get to lock. KJ has disappointed us here recently. He hasn't had as much upside as I would like to see from him, but he's been relatively consistent. And so seeing 30 minutes, 4,900 player, I'm comfortable with him showing up in the vast majority of my lines tonight. Nick Smith Jr., we've been dealing with him all year. In a soft matchup, I'm more willing to take a shot on him. His ownership is starting to go down, but I'll put a 10% min on him. I like having exposure to these cheapies who are seeing plenty of minutes. Salon is in the same situation for me. I have a 10% min on him. 3,800, seeing solid minutes, decent point per minute guy. And that should be all from the Hornets for me. I get the matchup for Bridges is really nice against the Jazz. The minutes haven't been there. If he sees 30 plus minutes, we know sky's the limit for him. But the Hornets aren't really playing for anything right now, so it's hard for me to imagine they're going to do that when they've started to trend his minutes in the wrong direction for us. Similar situation for Mark Williams, just not a lot for him to play for in a soft matchup. And that's pretty much it for me from the Hornets. Those are my 3 guys, and those are the only 3 guys showing up for me. All right, this next game, Heat against the Wizards, gets pretty interesting. I like this game more than most, I think. The tough part is Davion Mitchell's questionable. He had a late illness tag come up, but Andrew Wiggins is out. Duncan Robinson is out. I just mentioned Mitchell's questionable. We don't really know what's going to happen there. And then some of these other guys have been out for a while. Great matchup against the Wizards. They don't have a lot to play for, whereas the Heat still are a little bit. So no reason for them to worry about minutes for Hero or Bam. Fantastic matchups for them. They are Hero showing up in 49% of my lines, close to a core play. I might put a 60% min on him just to solidify the core a little bit more for me and allow for myself to get different in other places. And then Bam is showing up in 34% of my lines. Over the field, I have a little bit of an edge there. I like the spot for Bam too. So those are the 2 guys I don't really have to overthink. I know I want to see them show up in my lines. However much they do, the more, the better for me. After that, things get a little weird. Where going up against Washington, I like. The 6,100 price tag is tough, and also the ownership is tough. And we have cheap centers on the slate, like Bryant, like Filipowski, like Oscar. And then there's some other centers who aren't cheap who I like getting different with. So it was hard for me to prioritize him on the slate. I don't think he's a bad play by any means, though. He's fine. There's just other centers I like more. I have a like on him, and he's still not really showing up for me at all. Only 1% of my lines. So I'm just going to call it. I'm not going to force exposure to him on this slate. Davion Mitchell, if he plays, I am willing to force exposure. We have him projected for 33 minutes. He's been seeing a lot of run recently. Last game, he struggled with his shot, things of that sort. It just wasn't coming together, but I'm not going to let that dictate if I'm going to play him again in a soft matchup. The illness, if he plays, I think he'll probably be fine. If he doesn't play, then we'll pivot and look at guys like Burks. And even like Larson would be a little bit better for me, but it would really just solidify how much I like Hero more than anything. Davion, we talked about 8% min for now. Larson, 5% min. Highsmith, his ownership's going down. Thank God. I never like playing Highsmith. He is one of my least favorite NBA players. He should retire. From a DFS perspective, he's been a great Heat legend, all that stuff. But I don't need to see him on the court. So I have a 10% min on him. Larson, I'm going to lower that min to 3%. He's fine. He's just a low points per minute guy. So just someone I want to add in the mix. Burks, I actually like on this slate. So I like being a little bit over the field on him. He becomes much chalkier if Davion Mitchell gets ruled out. And then Kyle Anderson at 3,400 should see 20 minutes in a soft matchup. You never feel great about playing Kyle, but it makes sense here on this slate. So I put a 6% min on him. So again, the Heat are a team I like a decent amount. They're not like all going to be core plays or anything like that, but I do want to see them in my lines tonight, especially Hero and Bam. Things get weird again with the Wizards. I never really like picking on the Heat, but the Wizards players are so cheap and not seeing a lot of ownership, and they don't have anything to play for, but that's why we're not playing their stars. And even in some of these tough matchups, we've seen some of their high usage players persevere and come through. And so from a DFS standpoint, these are guys I like having in my GPPs. Don't really trust them as much when it comes to single entry and things of that sort, but I like seeing them in my 150. So I have a 4% min on Sar. Again, he's been a bit volatile, but just some model liked him. I like the minutes. The price tag's solid. The ownership is really what has me here. So I have a 4% min on him just for the GPP perspective. Champagne or Justin Champagny. This is a play I like a good bit. He's come through in tough matchups for the Wizards time and time again. And when you don't have exposure to him, you're like, again, he's doing this again. And I'm not going to be that guy, especially in a game environment that I wouldn't shock me if it stays a little bit closer than they expect. I want exposure to him at 5K. Not a bad mid-range option by any means. Carrington is projecting better, and so I have a 15% min on him. He's also slightly higher owned. a 17% min on AJ Johnson, 11% min on Vukcevic, 20% min on Martin. Martin, he's 4,100, significantly cheaper than like Carrington and Justin and AJ Johnson, but he's seeing the same minutes and he has a very close point per minute rate. And so that's why you're seeing more ownership on Martin. His floor is a little bit safer for us at that $4,100 price tag. And so he's someone I am comfortable having in some single entry lines. But like I said, there's a lot of value on this slate. Then I have a 3% min on Marcus Smart. That was really just more of a sim model play than anything. I never liked playing Marcus Smart. I'm even tempted to take off that min, but I'll just lower it to 2 instead of 3. But yeah, again, I like these Heat guys more than I thought I was going to. Let's see. All right, next up, we have the Kings going up against the Pacers. This game has the second highest total on the slate, which for me, you guys always know I'm looking for reasons to play players from this game. I'm not trying to find reasons not to. Starting off with the one and only Sabonis, 20% min on him. Bit of a revenge narrative going on here, but that's not really it. It's just the Pacers, especially without Miles Turner, should be a really soft matchup for him. Sabonis is one of those bigs where you're just like, if he's aggressive enough today, if he takes advantage of the nice matchup he has. He's been volatile this season, but he should dominate this spot. 9,200, not worried about that price tag, 20% min on him. Keegan Murray was just more of a sim model play. Gonna put a 1% min on him, mostly just because I think there's better value options, points per dollar options on the slate, but the sim model liked him a little bit, and so I'm always just gonna force exposure to guys like that in good game environments. And then that's pretty much it from the Kings. Okay. The Pacers side is when things start to get a little wild. For the Pacers, we have Miles Turner out, Bennedict Mathurin's out, and so because of that, the Pacers are the chalk on the slate. I did get a little nervous and I capped Halliburton and Siakam. I put a 60% exposure max on them. Halliburton was showing up close to that, but Siakam was starting to show up in like 80, 90% of my lines. And there's just other studs and pay up options in their price range that I like just as much as I like them. Again, it's a good game environment, so I'm not trying to fade them or anything like that. I just didn't feel like I needed that much exposure to them. Of course, if they go off and break the slate, I could regret that a little bit, but still being over the field is enough for me. And so I can literally show it. So Halliburton showing up in 55% of my lines, technically still a core play. Siakam showing up in exactly 60% of my lines, still a core play. I have like 40, 35% leverage here on these guys, but like they're not going to show up in every single one of my lines tonight. And then Nimbard was standing out for me a bit in the sim model. Nesmith was showing up a bit for me in the sim model. I'm always open to taking a shot on a $4,600 Nesmith. The minutes haven't been consistent, but if he sees just like a slight increase there, or if he has a really hot stretch, he's one of those players that can really help you win a GPP. He does have decent ownership, so it's not sneaky, but he's just someone I want to have in the mix. Nimbard, I do like, but I didn't want to force exposure to him. Obi Toppin, I think, is going a bit overlooked. He does disappoint us at times in these spots. Just he doesn't typically see 30-plus minutes, and at 4,200, he more than likely won't be the guy that everyone's running towards. But I put a 4% min on him. A little bit of a sneaky pre-lock show leverage play that I think could definitely pay out well for us tonight. In a good game environment, solid matchup, list goes on. I like having exposure to guys like Toby or Toppin on this slate. And then Thomas Bryant is who we're all expecting to start. Only 3,200. It just makes sense for him to be in pretty much every line tonight. He's in 97% of my lines right now, and I'm completely fine with that. And I think that's it. Yeah, I like the Pacers tonight. I am going to put a 10% min on Nimbard just so he doesn't piss me off. But I don't feel overly confident in him either. For me, when it comes to GPPs, I just like to cover my bases, especially when it comes to guys that I know can have slate breaking upside. I would never mind. I like Nimbard a little bit more in lines and Nesmith a bit more in lines that don't have Halliburton, but that's just not something I'm going to force in the DS, but just kind of like a personal preference. The next game, Clippers against the Magic, is kind of gross. Bogdanovic is questionable. Ooh, appreciate that, man. We'll go back to the Heat and see if the DS updates before we end. But the Clippers are relatively healthy at this point. They have a really tough matchup against the Magic. This game has the lowest total on the slate, so not what I'm trying to force a ton of exposure to, just trying to pick my spots here. Kawhi Leonard's going to be a leverage play for me tonight. And it's purely because of the sim model. 8,900, let's look at it. Look at Kawhi here. 3.99% chance of hitting 6.5x in value. Next closest guy is Tyler Hero, who is the chalk of the slate. But Kawhi actually has a higher chance of getting that. And so for me, even though I don't like the matchup, I don't like the game environment, I'm always going to trust the sim on these spots. I'm still going to have a shit ton of Tyler Hero, but I'm going to be double the field on a guy like Kawhi Leonard. There's other guys who we're going to talk about later too. But yeah, Kawhi is going to be someone I take a stand on. Zubac, I have a 13% min on. Don't love him either, just because I think we do have really good center options on the slate. But again, looking at the sim, 7,900. Zubac, 3.2% chance of hitting 6.5x in value. We have another sneaky center play that's similar, but there's not really anyone else in this price range that's comparable to that kind of upside. And so that's always what I'm shooting for, is upside to win me a GPP. Gonna take a shot on that every time. And Bogdanovic, if he plays, is fine. He's worth being in the mix of that like 3K, 4K value, but he's not someone I'm going to prioritize, and I didn't put a min on him either. So again, don't love the Clippers, but worth taking some shots on a few of these guys. Similar situation here with Paolo Banchero. Going up against the Clippers is never my favorite thing. Just again, looking at the sim here, 9,700. Paolo, 7.87% chance of hitting 6x value tonight, which is what we're shooting for, especially in this price range. That's an awesome performance. Only guy who has a little bit more upside here in this 9,700 or above range is Tatum. So I forced a 22% min on Paolo for those reasons. Wendell Carter Jr., again, more of a sim model play, just a 2% min on him. Not overly excited about these plays, but it just makes sense to me. Tattoo, now the NBA Go. I see you, man. Good to see you. Yeah, good to make sure you're representing both sides there. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate it. All right, next up we have another high total game environment. We have the Celtics going up against Memphis. For the Celtics tonight, I like them, but of course there's a Q tag. Jaylen Brown is questionable. If he doesn't play, we have a ton of really strong options tonight from the Celtics. If he does play, it's really just Tatum for me, and I'm taking a shot on Porzingis tonight. So I'm hoping Brown plays so we don't have to do a ton of late swapping, because I kind of like the way the slate's breaking out so far, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers. We'll see what happens. So I have a 26% min on Tatum. I just showed you the sim. It liked him. So, and it's a great matchup, great game environment. I was always going to force exposure to him here, no question. And then Porzingis has been relatively solid over the last few games. Every now and again, he'll disappoint us, but in a soft matchup against Memphis, good game environment, pace up spot for these guys. That's when I like to play Porzingis. 8K, we're not getting a discount or anything like that. I typically like to target him when he's in the like higher 7K range, but in a good spot, I'll take a shot on him here every time. So 6% min, leverage play for me tonight. I like him a lot. And then none of the other Celtics show up by themselves just because of the other value we have on the slate. Collier is showing up now a lot for me. I don't really know what happened for Isaiah to do that. I'm going to take that min off and see if that adjusts things at all. I don't hate him. I just don't want to force exposure if he's going to show up by himself. All right, and then the other side of this game is gross. Just Flat out honest is gross. Memphis going up against the Celtics here. From a matchup perspective, none of these guys are going to stand out for you. Sim model did like Bane a little bit, so I put a 2% min on him. I do like Zach Edey. I think he's going significantly overlooked. And he's someone I even thought about forcing a bit more exposure to. So Brandon Clark is out. He had that injury last game, and we actually saw Edey have a very strong performance. His minutes floor was a bit more solidified, and Memphis has something to play for here. So especially if this game stays close, like it has one of the closest spreads on the slate, I expect Edey to be out there a good bit, trying to match the size of Porzingis. So I have a 3% min on him. I thought about going higher, but we have a lot of good value on the slate. I will increase it to 5% because I feel pretty solid about him as a play tonight. We'll see what happens. And then we talked about Bane. That's pretty much it for me. I can't get creative with more of these guys, especially John, that 9K plus range. All right, next up, we have the Bulls going up against the Thunder. Brutal matchup, and of course, Josh Giddey is questionable. I think Josh Giddey is probably one of my favorite plays on the slate if he plays. The matchup's tough. Revenge narrative, I know, can be hit or miss for many of us, but I like the spot for him, especially in the highest game total of the slate. You all know me. I'm always going to force exposure here. You give me a good narrative, I'm going to double down on that. So 20% min on Giddey. If he doesn't play, at least because I have so much exposure to like the Kings and Pacers game, I do like being able to have a little bit more exposure to some of these later games because people are going to have a very hard time late swapping if we do get this Giddey news pretty late. So having a 22% min on Giddey and at least a few of my guard spots will allow for me to force some exposure to guys like Kobe White, have more exposure to guys like Dalen Terry and Buzelis, who all would see a nice boost if Giddey gets ruled out. So we'll see what happens there. But for now, I'm going to keep a 22% min on Giddey. His ownership is actually going down, so you can make a case for 20 or 15 as well. Kobe White, again, highest game total. I'm always going to force exposure to these guys. So 7% min on White, even in a tough matchup. 2% min on Vucevic. He's been not great this season, but I'll continue to take shots in good game environments. Matas, I have a 10% min on. Williams, 7% min, and Dalen Terry, 23% min. Zach Collins, the sim model, liked a bit, but I think we have better options on the slate. Also, he wasn't showing up still, and I don't care enough about him on the slate to force exposure there. But the other guys, I like a good bit. The ownership surprises me and creeps me out a little bit, but I like him, so I'm still going to play him. The spread is wide here. I think that's what has a lot of people nervous, but I don't really play for blowouts in the sense of, yeah, it sucks when it happens, but the blowouts in the NBA are so hit or miss. When you try to predict blowouts, you're probably wrong half the time, and then when you're not wrong, you can win a GPP. So I'm going to force exposure if the game environment's good. SGA, we know the Bulls are a bad defense, and so I'm always happy to have exposure to these guys. If the game blows out, which is likely, SGA probably won't get there for us. We know he has like 60, 70 point upside, but if the game blows out, that's just not going to happen. If it does stay close, I want to have exposure to him. That's why Tatum, like your safer pay up option on the slate. SGA is a little bit riskier, but he's also lower owned because of that. So 16% min on SGA, 6% min on Jalen Williams stood out for me a bit on the sim. And then Chet, I'll put a 3% min on, or a 4% min. I like Jalen, I like Chet, but they're not my favorite plays on the slate by any means. I just kind of want some exposure to them because the sim model was pointing me in that direction. And again, I'm looking for reasons to play these guys, not reasons not to. Outside of that, it gets gross. I can't get more creative than the plays I'm already doing. For the Nets going up against Dallas, the total's low. Third lowest on the slate. 9-point spread, not really a game environment that you're overly excited about. But I like picking on the Mavs. And if you show me a soft matchup, I'm almost always going to take a shot here. I really wanted to look at D'Angelo Russell, but he's just been so bad. His minutes are all over the place. I think that's getting a little bit too cute. With let me double check. Who do they have out? With Cameron Johnson, Noah Clowney, Day'Ron Sharp out, I'm more interested in taking shots on their bigs. And just given the matchup and price, I'm okay taking a shot on Keon Johnson as well. So I have a 3% min on Keon Johnson. Nick Claxton, I have a 2% min on. Technically double the field, but that's cheating. He's only 1% owned. But again, I like playing bigs against the Mavs. Even with AD, AD's a solid defender, but not necessarily from like a DFS perspective. We've always had decent success playing bigs against the Lakers, and so it's a similar situation here. And then 9% min on Watford. Again, I just still like playing bigs against the Mavs. And it looks like Drew Time is projecting well, but I don't see him showing up in any of my lines currently. And I'm not going to force him in because I don't have a strong opinion on him. This Mavericks game is a little frustrating. Last game, hammer game of the slate, AD at 20% ownership is just wild to me. I've been trying to understand it throughout the day. I really don't get it. I know the Nets are not a great rebounding team. And so his likelihood of getting a double-double tonight, relatively high. Feel pretty decent about that. But scoring and having slate breaking upside, that's where I get a bit more concerned. Let me look a little bit closer at him. He hasn't really been seeing more than 30 plus minutes either. And if he crushed on what day? It's Monday, Sunday, Saturday. If he crushed on Saturday against Chicago, a really soft matchup, I probably would have been excited about him. Not gonna lie. But 40 points isn't gonna cut it for us at 9,600 with some of the upside I think some of these other guys have. Sim model does like him at 9,600. It likes Tatum a bit more, and then it's AD, and then Paolo. Or no, it's Paolo, then AD. So you see like 1.25% here. It also is like a 0.004% on Harden. And ultimately, I'm just going to prioritize Tatum and Paolo, Giddey, and Sabonis over Davis. And I'm hoping if we get the news that Giddey's out, I'll have enough salary because of some of the savings we'll take off to be able to pay up to AD in some lines. But it's really only if Giddey's out that I am more interested in AD. If Giddey plays, as of right now, how much AD do I have? Don't tell me it's none. Fade on him and the hammer game is terrifying. Being in first would not feel good with seeing a lineup with Anthony Davis behind you. Golly, knowing he'll probably get a double-double. You're probably losing in that spot. But I'm not going to force exposure here. I don't love it. There's other plays I like more. Spencer Dinwiddie, similar situation. I'm just not going to do it. So there's scenarios that can play out on the slate where that could change. But for now, it's going to be what it is. B-Dubs, what's up, man? Good to see you. Glad you agree with me. I feel crazy looking at that, and I'm just like, what? Am I the problem? I don't know. Can you touch on the Lakers game for FanDuel? Yeah, I'll take a quick look. We have time. Question on center. Would you play the Jazz center 4K and Thomas and single entry? So I haven't looked at my single entry lines yet. But let me take a look at some of these lines and just kind of see what's happening. I would imagine that comes up a good bit where they're both in the same line. I just want to see what they look like. Yeah. Yeah. I'm very happy with that and content with it. At their price tag, Oscar can go out there and shit the bed, but I like playing bigs against the Hornets. And at 3,200. As long as Thomas starts, I feel pretty solid about him as well. It allows you to pay up for Hallie, Tatum, Bencaro. I think that's probably going to be like the chalkiest line out there, but I like it. And you can even get creative with some of the different pay up options that show up. Yeah, I think they're fine together in single entry. I have no problem with it. Okay. And then is there anyone else? Yeah, that's pretty much the slate. Let's look at FanDuel right quick. Look at these Lakers. I don't think, at least on the DK side, just kind of looking at some of the numbers, nice total. There weren't very many Lakers that were standing out for me, but the Rockets guys, they were a bit more they were just standing out for me a bit more. Ownership on Luka and LeBron. It's Luka and LeBron, good totals. You can definitely force some exposure there from pay up options. Let me see, who would I prefer here? I do think the other studs are still better. I would lean Luka, but he's so expensive. They're not really guys I would prioritize too much. Houston, low ownership, which is interesting. But dang, they are not looking good from a projection standpoint with just some of the better or other value we have here. Let me look a little bit closer at these matchups themselves. Yeah. I would be tempted to take some shots just to have some exposure to the hammer game. Guys like Jalen Green would probably be the most viable. Amon Thompson could be interesting, but they're so expensive. Even FVV is a little viable, but I just think there's better plays on the slate. But if anyone, I'm looking at Thompson, Green, Fred VanVleet, but ultimately not my favorite game. I just prefer the other higher total games. All right, let's get back on track. Let's look back at DK, what I know I'm talking about. No worries, man. R. Fletch said, would you be interested in building a quick lineup? Not today. I don't know if I ever will, just to be honest with you, just because I do typically use the DS so much. I have hand built in the past. It's just not something I've done in a long time, and I don't want to do something if I'm not going to use the line myself, if that makes sense. So I will see you all tomorrow, as long as nothing crazy happens. But good luck tonight. Hopefully we have some people taking down some GPPs in the Discord. And again, if you're not a DFS Army member, you're doing something wrong. Link is in the description. Promo code is BOB. And peace out. I'll see you tomorrow.